ياسين والقرآن الحكيم.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Welcome back to Embracing Quran, and we're still looking at Surah Ya Seen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continued mentioning the ayat, the signs. And what are these signs for? In verse number 32, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن كُلُّ لَمَّا جَمِيعٌ لَدَيْنَا مُحْضَرُونَ. All of them are going to be resurrected before us. All of them are going to be recollected before us. All of them are going to be presented before us. And this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the purposes of proving this, Allah brings a number of signs. So He brings the sign that people will be resurrected because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the capacity to take barren land and bring it back to life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that He takes the night and He makes it into day, and He takes the day and He makes it into night. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you the sign also of the sun and the moon. So all of these are signs of the power and the strength of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now Allah gives another sign. And Allah says to the people of the world that if you think about Noah, if you think about Nuh alayhi salam, and Nuh alayhi salam is a man who lived a very long life, and he was amidst a lot of people. A lot of those people, they ended up dying. But Allah says, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ أَنَّا حَمَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ فِي الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونَ. Another sign that they could have is that we took their offspring and we put them into the ship that was filled up. Okay? Now, there's a couple of things going on over here. Firstly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we took their dhurriya. We took their offspring. Whose offspring? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to the kuffar of Quraysh, the pagans of Arabia. So the question is, are these pagans of Arabia, are the people at the time of Nuh alayhi salam the offsprings of the people of Arabia? The answer is obviously not. Because the entirety of the humanity is from the offspring of the people who were with Nuh alayhi salam on that ship. So it's not the other way around, that the people who Nuh alayhi salam carried, they were the offsprings. It's rather, in fact, the people who came afterwards, like us, who happened to be the offspring of those people who got the opportunity to live. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a flood and everything was destroyed except whoever was with Nuh alayhi salam. So why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refer to them as dhurriyyah? This is very important, and that is that this is one of those words which is known as al-adad, the opposites. So a word has a meaning and the opposite of that meaning within that same word. So when the word dhurriyyah is used throughout the Quran, in many places in the Quran, it refers to offsprings, but in this place and in one other place, it doesn't refer necessarily to offspring, it's referring to people who have blood ties in general. Okay? And that's because the word dhurriya, it comes from the word dhara'a, which means to create. So it's as if Allah created us from them, and Allah used them to create us. So both of us are a dhurriya for the other person. We're both related to one another. We've both been created from each other. And that's what the word dhurriya means over here, even though in many translations, the word dhurriya is in fact translated as an offspring, but that is not an accurate translation. The accurate translation is that وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ أَنَّا حَمَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ فِي الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونَ. And another sign for them is that we carried their relatives in the filled up ship. And that was the ship of Nuh alayhi salam. وَخَلَقْنَا لَهُمْ. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَخَلَقْنَا لَهُمْ مِن مِثْلِهِ مَا يَرْكَبُونَ. And we created for them as well, we created for them of its likes as well that they end up using and that they end up riding as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the ship of Nuh alayhi salam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now saying that it wasn't just a gift that I gave to Nuh, that you had a ship that was flowing on top of water, rather it's something that is a talent that I gave to humanity. وَخَلَقْنَا لَهُم مِّن مِثْلِهِ مَا يَرْكَبُونَ. And this is very important because Allah is considering any ship that will come afterwards to be a sign. Because if you really think about boats and the way they flow on top of water, the way they float on top of water, and ships the way they float on top of water, they're carrying hundreds of thousands of pounds of weight. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows this ship to be able to stand on top of water and be very strong and cross entire oceans with a lot of containers nowadays, for instance. So that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed for water to do, despite the fact that normally if you put something in water, it drowns right away. But if you put a ship, the way it's been made, the way it's been created, and the fact that Allah gave the human mind the talent and ability to discover how to make a ship float as well, that's also a sign, and that's also a gift from Allah. So Allah is reminding humanity of that. And then in here, you could also think about the fact that it's not just those types of ships that were there during the time of Nuh alayhi salam. Allah saying, "Mim mithlihi," from the likes of that. Not exactly the same as that, but from the likes of that, because now we have motorboats, and we have an array of different things, and we have planes as well that are amphibian. You could have a plane that's working as a boat and then suddenly it starts to fly. These are all signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِن نَشَأْ نُغْرِقْهُمْ, and Allah says, if you don't see the sign, let me spell it out for you. If we really wanted, we could have made them all drown. فَلَا صَرِيقَ لَهُمْ. And sometimes Allah does as well. Because sometimes people, human beings, use this gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and abuse it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can test who He wills, when He wills, how He wills. So there are people who drown as well. But Allah says, generally, if Allah wished, He could make everybody who goes on the water drown. وَإِن نَشَأْ نُغْرِقْهُمْ. And if we wished, we could have made them drown. فَلَا صَرِيخَ لَهُمْ. There would be no one to respond to them. Now the word sarikh, it's a word that's also one of those words that has one and another meaning as well. So sarikh is a responder to the call, and sarikh is also the caller himself as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by choosing this word, He's trying to bring both meanings to light. He's saying that they will be so far in the water, they will be so deep into the water body, that there will be no one who will be able to observe them, so that He starts calling out, help, 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 because there's no one there to see them drowning. And if there were to be someone to call, because obviously these people are drowning, they might say, help, 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 we're drowning. There will be no one to hear that call as well. فَلَا صَرِيخَ لَهُمْ أَيْ لَا مُغِيثَ لَهُمْ وَلَا مُسْتَغِيثَ لَهُمْ. There's no person who's going to be able to help them, and there's no person who will be able to make a call out for them as well. فَلَا صَرِيخَ لَهُمْ. And to add salt to wound and fuel to fire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا هُمْ يُنْقَذُونَ. And even if there was to be a call, even if there was to be a caller, and even if there were to be someone who could hear that call, they would still not be saved. وَلَا هُمْ يُنْقَذُونَ. They would never be able to be saved. إِلَّا رَحْمَةً مِنَّا وَمَتَاعًا إِلَى حِينٍ. Except as a rahmah from us. وَمَتَاعًا إِلَى حِينٍ. What's this rahmah? What's this mercy that's coming from Allah? And what's this provision that's also to a certain appointed time from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah is saying that the only reason why I didn't end up drowning them is because of my mercy. And I did so also, مَتَاعًا إِلَى حِينٍ, so that I may provide them to a certain period. So this is a temporary provision. It's a further test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is granting them some more respite and some more time to see if they're going to change their ways. And now the ayat finish. Now, all of the signs have been mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is done giving the signs for the fact that the proofs and evidences for the fact that they will be resurrected before Allah, and that they will be standing before Allah, and that after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroys them, they will be all gathered and recollected before Allah. Allah has told them that, didn't you look at the land that was barren and I made it come back to life? Just like that, you're also going to come back to life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them that, didn't you see the night? The night completely disappears when morning comes. But when Allah wants the night to come back to life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the morning disappear as well. And similarly, when the morning disappears, it's pitch darkness outside. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes the morning to come back, it comes back again as well. So that's a sign. If Allah can take that huge creation of His, the darkness that envelops the entirety of humanity and world, if Allah can take that and Allah can completely expel that from the horizon and bring light therein, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the capability to take any opposite and make that opposite leave and the other opposite arise and come. So if you've died, Allah can bring you back to life. That's the point again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look at all these huge creations of mine, the creatures, the sun and the moon, and how when the morning comes you have the sun, and that sun disappears from the horizon, and then the moon comes as well, and that cycle continues, and Allah makes one disappear for the other to come. If Allah has the capability, the capacity, the strength, the power, the ability, the dominance, the dominion to be able to do that, then who are you? You're just a little being. Allah can bring you back to life as well. And now Allah says all of these people who were there during the time of Nuh alayhi salam, during the time of Noah, all of them die. And it's only Nuh alayhi salam and whoever Allah allowed Nuh to bring along with him on the ship, they're the only ones who remained. If Allah has the power to destroy all of humanity in a flood and make people remain and then recreate from those people, millions of people like you and I, and all of humanity today in every part of the world, if Allah can do that from just a few people that are on one ship, then obviously Allah has all capacity to create. So it's not hard for Allah to recreate us and bring us back to life. And now Allah says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ. Now it's another segment of the surah. Allah says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون. Now you've gotten all the signs, guys. When it's said to them, fear whatever is before you, اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون, and whatever is after you as well, perhaps Allah will give you mercy. When it's said to them that you should be afraid of whatever is to come, as in the Day of Judgment and all the calamities of the Day of Judgment, and the difficulties and trials of the Day of Judgment, and also whatever's after the Day of Judgment, and that's either bliss or fire. So when it is said to them that fear this, وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ, and also whatever was before as well, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, perhaps you will be given rahmah from Allah Azza wa Jal, perhaps you will be given mercy from Allah Azza wa Jal. They don't listen. That's the point. Allah doesn't even respond. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't even mention the outcome. Right? He says, when it is said to them that you should be fearful of whatever is before you and whatever is after you, perhaps you may have the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't say what they do, whether they accept the nasiha or not, whether they accept the advice and counsel or not. Because it's obvious from the context of the surah that these people are not willing to accept. They've been granted so many signs, but they're still not listening. Allah says, وَمَا تَأْتِيهِم مِّنْ آيَةٍ مِّنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ إِلَّا كَانُوا عَنْهَا مُعْرِضِينَ. Not a single sign from the signs of Allah come to such people, except that they completely turn their faces away from that sign. It's not just that they reject the sign, they believe the sign is not even worthy of their conversation. Okay? So it's not like they've literally manned up to the conversation and said, you know what, I like what you're saying, but I don't accept it. It's more like they believe that these signs are so pathetic, even though they're so powerful, but their arrogance has taken full hold of them. They believe that these signs are so pathetic that they're not even worthy of their conversation. So through their immense arrogance, they just turn away. Allah says, إِلَّا كَانُوا عَنْهَا مُعْرِضِينَ. They completely turn themselves away from these signs. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, and whenever it's said to them, أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ, spend from whatever you have been granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَنُطْعِمُ مَنْ لَوْ يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ أَطْعَمَهُ إِنْ أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. Now they're mocking. They're resulting to mockery. And Allah is talking about their mockery here, because this mockery is the bigger problem, and not feeding to people or not feeding people is a smaller issue. Okay? Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about these people. Whenever it's said to them that you people, you've gotten all this wealth from Allah. Allah has granted you so much wealth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you so much rizq and sustenance. So you should be taking some of that sustenance and giving it to people. The people who disbelieve, they say to those who believe specifically. Notice all of this. They say to who? They say specifically to the ones who believe that should we be feeding people that if Allah wished to feed them, He would have fed them already? Because they're not feeding because they're disbelievers. There are a lot of people who disbelieve in God, but they feed the needy. A lot of people who happen to be disbelievers in God, they know that they have a few days in this life and they're living in a transitory life, if they've made $100 billion or $50 billion, they know they're not going to be able to deplete all of that money within their lifetimes. But what do they do with that money? When they come to that recognition that I've already grown into my 50s, I've already grown into my 60s, I've already grown into my 70s, they take that money, they make a foundation and they put the 20 billion or 30 billion in there and they let people benefit from that money, right? A lot of people do that. So disbelief doesn't mean they're not going to be spending on human beings or they're not going to be feeding people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not trying to make that conclusion over here, because Allah knows, and we know also through the human experience, that there are a lot of charitable people out there who also disbelieve in God. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about their rhetoric and the way they're speaking and the way they're mocking those who believe. Allah says, whenever you say to them that you've got to be feeding people, God has gifted you and God has granted to you. قَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those people who've disbelieved, they're saying to the believers, should we feed those people who God, if He so wished Himself, would have fed them already? I mean, are we better than God? God didn't wish to feed these people and you guys believe in a God, right? So if God didn't feed them, why should I feed them? And that's a problem. That's arrogance at its epitome now. Now, they're not only stopping at disbelieving in God, they're mocking the believers in God as well. In antum illa fi dalalin mubin, and they use this opportunity to try to prove their point and to try to ridicule the people of the belief as well. And they say, you people are just in dalal mubin. You people are just completely lost. You're losers, basically. You're completely, deeply mistaken. وَيَقُولُونَ مَتَى هَذَا الْوَعْدُ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And they also say, when is this promise of God that you so speak of? إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ, if you happen to be truthful. If you happen to be truthful, and that's also not a complete sentence because there needs to be the jawab al-shart as well. So what's the jawab al-shart? The answer of إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ? Well, the answer there is that if you are truthful, then produce this promise of God. You guys keep telling us of a day of judgment and you guys keep telling us of a wrath that is imminent and it's coming from God, then why don't you produce it? In kuntum sadiqeen. Look at the level of arrogance they have. How many cities are there in the world that we know from human history and through excavations and archaeological findings which have been completely destroyed? Even within our lifetimes. We have cities that were completely destroyed or burnt down or completely, annihilated through a flood, like a tsunami or like a forest fire. There's a lot of those. Even within our lifetimes we know of that. And these people, when they're told of these stories, they think they're just the fables of the past. And so they are so arrogant that they're asking the messengers, in kuntum sadiqeen, if you happen to be truthful, then bring those promises and destroy us and show us the wrath of Allah. Because they have lost all direction. They've lost all compass of humility before God. They're very emboldened by the monetary wealth that they have. And Allah tells us of this in the Quran as well, that whenever a human being istaghna, whenever he sees himself, ar-ra'ahu istaghna, whenever he sees himself being completely self-sufficient, he starts to become very, very arrogant, and he starts to become very, innal insana la yatgha, he starts to become oppressive and repressive. He starts to become a very arrogant human being if he feels that he's been granted by God. So these people, they feel they've been granted by God, and that's why they're making a mockery of those people who are asking them to feed the needy. مَا يَنظُرُونَ إِلَّا صَيْحَةً وَاحِدَةً تَأْخُذُهُمْ وَهُمْ يَخِصِّمُونَ. And we'll stop here بإذن ta'ala, and we'll carry on with the tafsir of Surah Ya Seen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to practice, to convey. Jazakum Allahu khairan for listening. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.